Hi everyone and welcome to another video. So in today's video I'll be speaking about Fedora and why I have chosen this distro as basically my main distro on Linux side. So I'm using both Windows and Linux. They are on different hardware and on different drives, let's say. PC is basically the same. And in today's video I'll be discussing about why I like Fedora, what parts I don't like about it, and why it's a good distro for like beginners and more advanced users in the Linux realm. So let's see for the first what version we have here. Okay, we have version 35 with kernel 5.16. The next month should come the Fedora 36, if I'm not mistaken. So we will see, it depends. And first of all, let's speak about what are my favorite things here in this Linux distro. So the installation process is pretty easy, though the wizard is a bit weird. In the installation you have buttons on the top left, so it's a bit inconvenient, but it's easy to understand and install the distro. You can get it from the official website, like getfedora.org. So my version is workstation version, they have server and IoT version too. So the first thing I like here is basically the performance with simplicity. So you don't have much of the stuff here by default installed, so you can even uninstall without any issues most of the apps here. So you can have without bloat, very clean and very responsive Linux distro Fedora. So the system is simple and it can do advanced tasks like for more professional use, and performance is really good here. Another thing I like here is basically the distro is somewhere in between Debian based ones and Arch Linux. So you get like good updates and recent software, but not so up to date as Arch based Linux distros, and not so outdated like Debian based distros. So the stability is also pretty good, being there somewhere in the middle, like the sweet spot between stability and up-to-date operating system and packages. So you don't have to wait like in Ubuntu or other distros to get the updates like half a year or even more for long-term supported versions. Another thing I like here is the updates. So the updates are basically very smooth and fluent, so you won't get any issues like in the other distros. You may kind of break your system if you do update to the kernel or some important libraries from the OS itself. Here we have, even as a security measure, I guess, the previous version of the kernel saved. So if something goes wrong, you can boot from the menu the previous kernel. So it's again a security stability measure to make the distro just work. So it shouldn't be any issues about that. And the updates are pretty regular and basically very often made. So they are not so intrusive like Ubuntu, for example. They ask you every time to install the update. You can install them, you can choose not to install them, or you can, for example, update when you are done working with the system and decide to shut down the computer. Check the mark for installing updates, so it will install updates when you shut down your computer and you are free, basically. So it's a good option again with the updates. As you can see, you can update here. And it's up to date. The command line is a bit interesting because it uses DNF package manager, so most of the commands will work like the syntax from Debian but with DNF, but others won't. So it's a specific command line, which is an interesting one. Some may like it, some may don't, so it's a matter of preference, but I can say it's kind of interesting, the command line here, and how you are using those commands. But again, it's not very hard to get used to the commands in the terminal, but it's for new users maybe a bit of a challenge to try to master the terminal and understand all the stuff like in command line. The design is also from GNOME 41. Here is the next version will be 42. So GNOME is one of the purest form, let's say, in Fedora, and I also like it because it's like simple and functional and great looking after all. So it's pleasant to work with. And the performance, as I said, it's really good and very, very well made. There are a lot of options here in the settings too, and can customize, can tweak and even do your changes, so you can customize all the stuff you want here. And with GNOME tweaks, as I am using right now, can change a lot of stuff here, even the theme and the other customization options. Okay, so now I'm going to speak about a little about things I don't really like here in Fedora. So there are a few ones. Like, first of all is scaling, and scaling we have here like only 3 options: 100%, 200% and 300%. That's not very intuitive, especially with 4K displays and ultra wide displays. So you may want 100% is too small, you may want 120 with fractional scaling, or 150 maybe. So it's not a very good option. We do not have the fractional scaling, so we have just these big values, and 200% is too big, of course, and not even speaking of 300. So it would be nice to have like fractional scaling and more adaptation to the resolution, let's say. For example, my display is 21.9, so it's a tricky resolution, and it's not very easy to scale and make it work optimal with the screen. I used GNOME tweaks and some terminal commands to adjust the resolution and the scaling. Scaling is about 120 here, so it's not 100, it's a bit more. So I can have the menus and the windows visible and be like decent visible. Also, scaling affects a bit the windows, because if I open, for example, the file manager, it's too small, like the size would be something like this, I think optimal, maybe a little smaller, but with the scaling that is not done right, some parts are not very consistent, and windows aren't very, especially in Microsoft Edge also, these bars are very taking from the space and very unpleasant to look at. So it's a problem, I guess, and maybe in the future there'll be much more optimization and well made. Another thing I am not really a fan of is some software from RPM repositories. So basically, we have here, if we are looking in the store, like LibreOffice, for example, it's only an LTS, I guess, version is 7.2, but in reality there is available more recent version, it's like 7.3, and this version is a bit outdated, and we do not have at least a choice, so we can choose what version of LibreOffice we want to use, the stable one or most recent one, for example. Also things like Steam and other proprietary apps from RPM Fusion sometimes may lag and not work very well, so they are not very well optimized. For Wayland, I guess, on the Xorg works much better. But again, there is, I guess, a problem with DNF. Some other reviewers complain about DNF is not very up-to-date software there, so it's an old format, not very innovative, let's say, which Fedora is classified as innovative distro, so they need to do some changes and updates to the DNF file system itself, package manager. Of course, we have here Flatpak, and other third-party stores can be installed, like Snap, but again, those came with advantages and disadvantages. Flatpak is really nice to use, so it has a lot of apps there, and it's convenient to like use all the apps from there if they aren't available native in DNF. So bottom line, I can't complain much about Fedora. What can I say? There are much more things I like in Fedora than I don't, so I guess it's a win-win situation where I'm happy to use this distro and experiencing all the new stuff it's coming to the GNOME special, GNOME 41, GNOME 42, and consistency of the integration interface from the shell to the OS itself. Like for example, Ubuntu is not very well integrated, and it's like parts of GNOME made there in some kind of interpretation and custom shell for Ubuntu itself. So here Fedora is much more consistent, and I like it. That's a good step forward, let's say. Now that a lot of operating systems like Windows itself is struggling to optimize the consistency of interface and the design of the apps so they can look like the whole ecosystem and the whole team is respected, let's say. So basically that was for today's video. Next time I hope will come Fedora 36, so I can make a video about that, and we'll see the new changes and what things I like there, and some potential disadvantages, or let's say the other weak points may be in the 36 version. So thanks again for watching, and see you in the next one.